as Mr. Athas. And during this COVID pandemic time, Mr. Engstrom asked me to do some demonstration things about a pipe organ. That's not a digital organ or electronic. We're here in the First United Methodist Church of Whitewater, where I've been working for 45 years. And I wanted to show you a few things about pipe organs and the instrument. First, a very short organ history. The pipe organ can trace its roots back to the 300 BC era, in the time of the ancient Greeks. They had some kind of hydraulic contraption that created a lot of air pressure to force it into a few pipes. And it made a terrifically loud sound, which really must have impressed the people of that day. By the 1400s, pipe organs became more common throughout Europe in cathedrals and in churches. And they were pretty well established by then. Pipe organs can range in size from 61 pipes up to over 30,000. This particular pipe organ here at First Church has about 1,100 pipes in it, about 22 ranks or sets of pipes. Each pipe has its own sound, and even the highly decorated ones you see above are working pipes, not just decorative. They're painted with gold leaf, and they're decorated in a style of the Victorian era, because this particular organ was built in 1898. It started its life in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and then about 20 years ago or so, that church was closing and we bought it. It was disassembled and renovated and put together here in this church. So it fits the history of the church, because the building itself was built in 1872. If we look a little closer, you can see it has keys like any other keyboard instrument in the same black and white pattern. And it has two keyboards. Some organs have one, some organs have 3, 4, or 5. This is the most common. This keyboard is called the Great Keyboard. I don't know how it got that name, maybe it's just really great. It sounds like this, with one stop on it. This top keyboard is called the Swell Keyboard, not because it's really just really swell, but there's a box at the very top of this organ that has shutters that open and close to let the sound out. And I can control that somewhat with this old retro kind of pedal down here, softer or louder. And of course, a lot of people are curious about the pedal board, and that's where the feet have to do their thing. So all these parts work together to make the big sound. Now the sound can be very big or very small. You may not hear the smallest or lightest sound that it has. And of course, you can really crank it up. How many of you at home have heard the expression, mostly from athletes, when they do a great job, they say, "We really pulled out all the stops today." Well, that's where this came from. These are stops, and it brings different sets of pipes into play. So when you pull out all the stops, you gave it your best effort on the athletic field. When you pull out all the stops on the organ, you get everything it's got. piano player comes to play an organ, initially they don't do it very well. Because unlike a piano, when you push the organ key, it starts, it stops. And it doesn't get louder if I hit it harder, or softer if I hit it softer. It's the same volume. Except on this keyboard I can vary it a little bit because of the shutters upstairs. But also, piano players depend on the pedal to help glue things together. Well, on the organ you can't do that. So a piano player would come and play a hymn that they know very well. Perhaps you've heard this one. But it would sound like this. You see how disjointed that is? When you start learning the technique, you learn to substitute fingers and make it sound more fluid. To make a more smooth line. And that's one of the basic differences playing an organ correctly. Now let's show a few things that the organist has to learn how to do. Well, very often we just have the hands working together. The pedal's not going to do much. A little bit of this. But they have to work together. Sometimes the pedal down there gets a solo, like this. I missed a few. I'll have to work on it. And sometimes, when you get into these pieces, everything has to work together. And maybe you can see this later. Come in. If I should do both these pages. Maybe. How many minutes are we in, Katie?
9.
takes a little practice. Well, before we move on, I just wanted to talk about some of the stops we pull out. These stops we pull out bring various sounds into play. Now, these sounds are not intended to be sounding exactly like the real instrument. They're just imitators. A diapason sound is basic organ sound. Or you add octaves above. A coupler brings the sound to different places. And mechanically pulls down this key up here. There are various flute sounds that sound very flute-like, like the real thing. This kind of flute is lighter. This one even lighter. This is intended to be like an oboe. This is intended to be like a trumpet, not exactly. And many other sounds. This stop brings in 3 pipes at once. You push one key and you get 3 sounds. This one adds a 5th. It's kind of strange. Listen. Here's middle C. Add this one stop, and here's what you get. Just adds another tone color. So that's it for the basics of this. Now let's look at some of the inner workings of this organ. Okay, now we're going to look at some of the inner workings of a pipe organ. And you can see the keyboard is attached. On this kind of organ it has to be. It has thin strips of wood that go all the way to the top and connect everything. So it has to be physically connected. You can't have this keyboard be anyplace else in this room. Some organs can do that. Some organs that are real pipe organs, but they have the keyboard elsewhere with a bundle of wires that can go in and control electric valves. And this was developed in the 1920s and 30s with big theater organs. And many pipe organs are built that way today. But this is old school, and it's the way Bach would have played, the kind of organ he would have had back in 1700s. We look inside, you can see where the air is filled up. This is a long table-like structure. It goes all the way across. We'll see it from the other side too. It's a board sandwiched together with leather to keep the air in. An organ needs a vast amount of air in order to work. Lots of air at low pressure. And if I turn the air pump, that's the only electric thing on this, is the electric air pump, so no one has to pump it by hand. We'll look at that a little bit later. Let's turn it off. See what happens to this air reservoir. You can see it collapsing under the weight of those bricks until it goes all the way down. And when you fill that up full of air and keep filling it, it provides steady air pressure, low air pressure, and high volumes of air. Air which goes through these wooden wind trucks to feed the wind chests and feed the pipes so they can sound. You notice some of the other mechanicals. When I pull stops, I think you can see some of the mechanism, all very clever, designed back in 1898, so they kind of knew what they were doing. Here is a feature that we left on the organ when we had it installed here. It's called a water motor. You can see it's not connected to anything. But probably in the 1900s, just before electricity came in, the organist would turn on the organ, not with this, That wouldn't even be here. You would turn it on with this, like opening a valve, like your garden hose. This would let water underneath the system into a water motor. The city water pressure would spin an air blower and provide air from city water. When you wanted to turn that organ off, you would tighten this like a regular faucet and stop the water. The air pressure would stop and the organ would be on. Of course, before that, it was pumped by hand. I'll show you that later. But this is just something we kept as part of the interesting history of this instrument. So, let's look inside the instrument. Should we go? So here we are behind the organ, inside the organ chamber. And you can look around and see some of the larger pipes made of wood. These are basically the large flute type pipes, a little bit bigger than your average flute. As I said, this organ was built before electricity, so they would have to hire someone, probably a young boy or a teenager, to hand pump this organ. I don't know if you can see if I get in the way. But it has this lever, and when you got a signal from the organist to start pumping to provide air, this would be pushed as quick as you could, pulled and pushed. And if you push and pull, there are bellows down there. Maybe Katie can show you. See the bellows working up and down? And they provide air both ways, both directions. As you pull up, air goes in. Remember, we want to fill up that big reservoir you saw with the bricks on it to provide even air pressure. So this thing can operate unplugged, as it were. Over here, you see the rows of pipes all set in their place. Look up, you can see these thin strips of wood. Many, many of them, and some roller bars and other devices that help transfer the motion of the key to a valve up above. That box way up high is a swell box, and it's full of pipes and has shutters in the front that I showed you with a pedal I can open and close. These strips of wood are kind of remarkable because they're only designed to pull. So when you push a key, these pull a valve open. And they're incredibly strong, although you wouldn't think so. Here's a piece of one right here. Breaks like that. So they're not that strong they can be broken if you push on them. But if you pull on one, they're incredibly strong, and those trackers can pull on those valves for 100 years and not break. Over here, you can see the pipes continue, and I guess here's one of the largest ones in this organ. Now they can get bigger. The biggest pipe in some instruments gets twice as big as this. So the size range from a pipe can be as small as a pencil or big enough for a young toddler to crawl inside to make those lowest notes. So there's a lot of mechanism back here. And the only electrics are the air pump right here under the box. So I don't have to hire anybody to pump the organ for me, although we have done that a few times. Let's go back to the front of the instrument and finish up our discussion. And here we are back at the front of the instrument, and we're going to finish up today. I just want to impress upon the engineering of folks back in 1898. They knew what they were doing. You think this would be hard and difficult to play on your hands and fingers and joints, and it's not at all. You know, we press a key, and the motion goes 10 feet that way and 20 feet up in the air to open a valve back where you saw. And it seems light as a feather and responsive as any modern instrument. Let's try it. you can see how quick and light and lively and responsive this old instrument can be. Pretty amazing technology. The old ones are fun to play, and so are the new ones. That's all for today, and I'm going to finish up with a short piece. So, thanks for listening.